time's up for me here in LA. Not because I want it to be, but because the US government just sent me an email saying, get out, time's up, buddy. So this week, I thought I'd try a new format. I want to walk you guys through all of the interesting hands I played this week and point out all the mistakes I'm still making, but things I've learned as well. So you can make more money if you're playing here or if you come visit. So let's dive right in. The very first hand, I have pocket fives. There's an open to 25 bucks. I'm in the cutoff, I flat.
Tip time with Tom.
Bigger opens mean stronger ranges, but the correlation in LA is absurd. The average open for most people is 20 bucks. Any deviation up from this is an absurd sign of strength. Unless you're playing with a maniac or drunk guy, don't go flatting dominated hands, like suited a6, suited broadways. Instead, play hands that can crack monsters and have very easy folds when you miss on the flop. The flop comes queen 5-3 rainbow. He bets out for 50 bucks and I put in a call. Definitely no need to raise here yet. Turns a 3 and he continues. This time 85 bucks. Still a super dry board, we're in position, there's no need to raise. I put in a call again and the river is a 4. And E7 makes it straight and he deuce makes it straight. And he continues barreling. He bets out for 175 bucks. I have 325 bucks total in my stack and let's think this hand through quickly. How does he ever have a 7 or a deuce? He's not going to be blasting those for that size on the flop or sizing up with them pre-flop. If he did have a 7 or a deuce, he most definitely would have shoved himself. So that leaves me with one option. I shove for my 325 bucks. I gotta give credit to him. He calls out my exact hand and then ends up folding.
Tip time with Tom.
You have to be extremely proactive with table changing, especially at the commerce. The second your table becomes tight and grindy, get out of there. There's no honor in battling nitty grinders. On top of that, the room isn't nice enough to waste your time with grumpy old regs without good action. I was on the table change list as soon as I sat down. Next hand, I get moved tables. I post 5 bucks on the button to be dealt in, and I look down at king queen. There's a limp, so I bump it up to 25 bucks. Small blind calls, big blind folds, limper calls. 3 ways to a flop of queen 8-5 with 2 clubs. Checks over to me, and I start off with a bet of 30 bucks. Ton of draws, ton of worse queen next to charge, and one pair hands aren't going to be folding yet. Small blind calls and the limper calls, which makes it quite interesting. Now I'm starting to doubt whether I have 3 streets worth of value. So when it turns 10 and it checks over to me again, I'm going to play a little bit of pot control here. On this kind of board, multi-way, I definitely can't play for all of it. So I check it back. River is an offsuit deuce, and small blind comes out and leads for 85 bucks. When I check back the turn, it's to call the river here. The limper ends up folding and I snap call. He shows a queen and mucks the other card. And I get the same hand, but the suited variety 2 hands later. I look down at king queen of hearts, open up to 20, and only the big blind defends. It looks like another pretty good flop when it comes queen jack 8. But something interesting happens. The big blind leads, and he leads for a pretty big size. He leads for 30 bucks.
Tip time with Tom.
Hero folds make way more money than hero calls in these games. The pool is massively under bluffing and not value betting thin enough. Aggressive actions like donks, 3-bets, and check raises are massively weighted towards value. The earlier you're able to identify a range where bluffs are already hard to find, the more money you're gonna save. Obviously, with top pair, second best kicker, we're not going anywhere yet, so I put in a call. The turn is an ace of clubs. This makes it kind of ugly, especially when he continues. He continues for a size of 50 bucks. A hand like king 10 now also completes, but I think he would probably go bigger. So that leaves the same hand as mine, king queen, some jack 10s, jack 9s, and then pretty much all the flopped 2 pairs, and maybe a set of 8s. I think this is a fine call, but with the story the guy's telling us, I wouldn't mind folding already. This time I do put in a call, and the river's a 4. He continues again for 110 bucks, and let me tell you, a triple lead on a board like this, I'm never good. So I make the fold I probably should have made on a turn. I think it's pushing it a little bit far if you're going to start folding this on the flop, because then you call nothing. And people do give up their bluffs and their worst value hands. So you do get to realize your equity and play very clean poker. Which brings me to the following hand. There's a limp again, I look down at aces, bump up to 25. New player in the big blind sits down and puts in a call. Limper calls as well, so 3 ways to a board king 4-3 with 2 hearts. I don't have the ace of hearts, but as long as no other heart comes, I have the perfect hand to charge all king X for 3 streets. So when it checks over to me, I'm going to try get it all by the river.
Tip time with Tom.
A $500 cap game in the 5-5 game sounds like 100 big blinds, but in live poker, that plays way shallower. There's way more callers and multi-way pots, meaning SPRs fall off a cliff instantly. This means it's super rare for you to have to use an overbet to be able to get in all the money by the river. The The game gets shallow fast. Plan your ranges around this. Strong top pairs and over pairs on dry boards are worth your entire stack most of the time. You don't need crazy setups to be all in by the river. I start off with a bet of 30. Big blind calls, limper folds. The turn is a 7 of spades and yes, 6-5 fills, but with the speed he called, it feels much more like a king. And we also can't be afraid of 4 combos he might have. There's about 140 bucks in the middle, and let's just make sure the SPR is less than 1 by the river. To do that, I again don't need to overbet. If I bet 100, there'll be 340 in the middle, and the guy will have 300 behind. Perfect. This guy beats me in the pot. When you get timing tells like this, it's pretty much always pair plus draw, super combo draw, or something that's relatively weak but trying to look strong. So a hand like King 10 or King Jack that doesn't want to face a river jam. The river is about as clean as it comes. It's the deuce of diamonds. He checks it over to me and there's pretty much nothing that beats us here. I stick in for his remaining 300 bucks and he snap calls. I table it and of course I'm good.
Secret tip time.
If you truly want the most amount of value, it's going to be on Coin Poker under code TOM. This month I'm giving away 1,000 bucks. My community is still small, so your chances of winning are absurd. All you've got to do is sign up with code TOM and play one hand of real money poker, and you're in for all my giveaways. In the next hand, I wish I listened to my own tips about hero folding. There's a limp, I bump up to 20 in the cutoff with 10-9 of clubs. Big blind calls and limper calls, of course. The flop comes pretty good from my hand. It's 10-9-8 with 2 spades and a heart. Kinda dicey, but looks pretty clean for now. When it checks over to me, this is one of those boards where it's kind of essential that you get raised by sets and straights right now, because otherwise it's going to get very expensive if it runs out clean. So I start off with a bet of 25 bucks. To this, both of them call. So I assume they've either got 10x or draws. The turn peels off a king of hearts, introducing even more draws. And this is where I wish I listened to my own tips. Big blind checks, but the limper now leads, and he leads for a very big size. He leads for 110 bucks. People tend to lead turns when 1, they improve, 2, they really don't want it to check through, or 3, they're happy to stack off. Let's think about how a king can really improve. King 10 makes quite a lot of sense. He's never leading a hand like King Queen or King Jack, as they still have to be worried about the 2 pairs, the sets, the straights. So if we think this through, well, I'm gonna call here and then call off for all of it on the river with 2 pair on this board. Doesn't feel like the greatest option, but I do anyways. I put in the call, big blind gets out of the way, and the river is a complete brick. Luckily for me, the guy was chatting away to his neighbor and throws in one $5 chip. This means he's not actually all in because he didn't say the words. For 5 bucks, obviously, I'm just gonna call. I put in the call and he does table King 10 offsuit. Kind of showcasing my point about how strong leads really are. That wraps up my first day. I'm not gonna reveal results until the very end. And I want you to guess from the hands I show how much I'm up or down by the end of the week. So without cheating, put your guess down below. The next day was a Thursday. Normally Thursdays are like the exciting day before Friday, and my first table was very much like that. However, I only got one interesting hand. There's 2 limps, I'm on the button of 10s, and I bump up to 35 bucks. Small blind calls, big blind calls, limpers fold. Who knows what that's about, but the flop isn't great. It's Queen, Queen, Jack with 2 hearts. Checks over to me, and this is another big mistake I made a lot.
Tip time with Tom.
You're gonna play a ton of multi-way pots, and the biggest mistake I was making early on was c-betting way too much. You're not gonna get enough folds. In most scenarios, stack depths aren't deep enough to have an elaborate bluff. So when you c-bet multi-way, be very selective. Very strong value hands, value that needs protection, your best nut draws, or hands with an absurd amount of equity. So I check it back. Turn is a 7 of clubs, and small blind checks, but big blind doesn't check. She leads out for 10 bucks, and this is the other side of the coin. When people lead for these super small sizes, it's trying to set their own price with a draw or a small pair, seeing if they're good. Those are the sizes you get to attack a lot. So I do attack it. I raise it up to 60 bucks and she just folds. That table, despite being crazy action, fell apart. I had to move tables and the new table was kind of a snooze fest. Which means I was only going to play a short session. And it only contained one interesting hand. There's a limp under the gun from a relatively young Japanese guy. I bump up to 25 bucks. The button, a super nit, flats, and now the Japanese guy bumps it up to 125. Limp raises are extremely strong. I end up folding, the button calls, and they go heads up to a flop of 10-9-5, where they end up getting all in. The undergun limp raiser had ace queen with the queen of spades, and the button had kings without a spade.
Tip time with Tom.
Be hyper aware of the trappers in LA games. Because the games are shallower, there's quite a few players that are absolutely devoted to trapping. They're trapping pre-flop, flop, turn, rivers. Once you spot it, you're going to start seeing it in every line they take. Make mental notes of these players, don't blast into them, and make egregious overfolds if they aggress. When you're bluffing, use small size against these players as it folds out the same part of their range. But let's move on to Friday. In the first one, there's a limp under gun. Under gun 1 makes it 25 bucks and I'm in the big blind with 8-6 of diamonds. I put in the call and so does the under gun limper. Throughways to a board of king 7-5 of 2 diamonds. Unlike a bunch of people at the commerce, you shouldn't have any leads here. So I start off with a check. Undergun now bets out for 30 bucks and gun 1 flats this 30 bucks. Undergun 1, who's the guy that ISO'd the limp, is a very nitty Japanese grinder. In the last week that I've been here, there's been a bunch of them and they all make the game feel very tight. But that does mean I can take advantage of it. He's very likely to be folding a king if I check raise here and shove the turn. My value is clear, 7s and 5s. That means I'm not going to need a lot of bluffs. I bump up to 115 bucks. The undergun limper gets out the way, and now the Japanese supernet does something I'm very unhappy with. He shoves it in. Either he knows I'm attacking with a flush draw and a combo draw, and he's decided to go with king X. The other option is he's flat to a hand like ace king or king queen of diamonds. Against those hands, I'm in pretty terrible shape. But if we think this through, there's 2 combos of ace king and king queen of diamonds, and everything else I have 50% or more against. So I don't think I get to fold. Let's gamble it up with 8 high. And the turn is a deuce. That's not what I'm looking for. But a river, an offsuit 9. I table the absolute nuts. As expected, he shows a super nut at hand. He shows aces. Which is interesting because I don't think I saw him play another hand in the 3 hours I played with him. I played a couple more small pots. Most interestingly, this one. I'm undergun with queen 10 of hearts, open up to 15, undergun flats and small blind flats. The flop comes queen queen 9 rainbow. Small blind checks, and I thought the guy behind me was c-betting way too much, so I thought I'd give him room here, and he checks it back unfortunately. I think this is a mistake. Especially on the flop, people are going to be floating super wide. Using a small size, inflating the pot a little bit, seems pretty good. Turn peels off the 3 of clubs, and small blind checks again. This time I'm not making the same mistake. I bet out for 20 bucks, undergun +1 folds, and the small blind doesn't. He puts in the call, and the river is a 6 of clubs. Now, mostly I think he's going to have 9x or pairs under the 9. So I try and charge that for 60 bucks. Unfortunately, this was still too much. He ends up folding and we take another nice pot before dinner break. And I have one more 3-bet pot for the day. On the second session, I was getting pretty slaughtered. Another table I definitely should have left. Either way, I'm in the cutoff and I open up to 20 with ace jack of hearts. Small blind and Asian reg bumps it up to 70 bucks. Versus fun players, this cannot be a continue. They're never 3-betting light enough. And you're basically continuing against a range that dominates the life out of you at very shallow stack depths. But against the reg who's attacking enough, I think this is fine. It comes queen 9-3 with 2 diamonds and a spade. He checks it over to me and this is not a hand I want to start using as a bluff just yet. Keep in mind, we also can't triple barrel bluff in 3-bet pots as the stack depth just doesn't allow it. He turns the 10 of spades and he checks it over to me once again. Now I actually think we have the perfect hand to bluff. If we get jammed on, we don't actually give up that much equity. He's never double checking a set or a straight, and he's going to feel super uncomfortable with 1 pair of hands. I also have to make sure I threaten the all-in on the river. So we want to use a big size here. I bet out for 100 to 20 bucks, and he goes into a 3-minute tank before folding. However, this is one of those spots where if he does call turn and it bricks out on the river, it pretty much always gets through. But this was only possible because I checked flop. A big adaptation you have to make from deeper games. After that session, I had a long weekend. I enjoyed July the 4th in the US, and I was ready to grind again on Monday. The first interesting hand on Monday, I have king queen off under the gun, and I bump it up to 20 bucks. Under gun 1 calls, he's a super nit. Bottom flats, small one flats. Both of these guys, big action players. The flop comes queen 9-6, 2 diamonds and a club. Small blind checks, I'm going to start off with a check here, but wouldn't mind a bet either. However, the super net will give us a big indication of whether I'm good here. Unfortunately, this time he bets out for 30 bucks. Button gets out the way, but the small blind calls. I again don't think I can go anywhere just yet. There's still combo draws, maybe some worse queen X. However, he doesn't flat queen jack off here, so it's got to be queen jack suited and king queen off, at worst. The turn is a 9 of clubs. Small blind checks, and I know I can't lead. Small blind can have some of this, and undergun 1 can definitely still be ahead. I check over to him and he continues. He bets out for 75 bucks. Small blind gets out the way. And this might be the call I'm most upset at over all the weeks of poker I played in LA. At best, I'm chopping, but most of the time I'm dead or drawing to a chop. It's quads, full houses, over pairs, or ace queen. I have the mental note on him and and yet in-game I still put in a call. The river's a 7 of hearts, I check it over to him, planning to snap fold, but it doesn't come to that. And of course my mental note was right. He has ace queen of spades. In the next one we get a little out of line, but it's against an action player, so it's okay in my eyes. She limps and I bump up to 20 on the button with queen 9 off. Big blind calls, she calls as well. Flop, excellent to get out of line with. It's queen 9-7 with 2 hearts. Big blind checks, she checks, and I start out with a half pot bet. I bet for 30, big blind gets out of the way, but she calls. Turns an 8 of spades, completing jack 10, and she leads for 75 bucks. With how much of an action player she is, I know she'll also lead with 2 pairs like 9-8 and 8-7. So it's definitely not exclusively jack 10. It's the complete opposite player profile of the player from the last hand. So I do put in a call, and the river is a 3 of hearts. She checks it over to me, and she never has a flush. If she's leading turn with some sort of flush draw or 8x of hearts, she's not giving up when she gets there. If she's got a straight, I think she bets the same amount as she did on the turn, just trying to get the showdown. So this pretty much means I think it's always 2 pairs or queen x that wanted to defend its equity. It's a thin value bet, but it's one I gotta make. I bet for 100 bucks, this time no payment though. She folds and we move on. For the last hand of the day, I'm on a different table. I open ace 5 of clubs to 15 bucks, I get a flat in the cutoff, button and big blind. 4 ways to flop with 9-6-5 with 2 hearts. Checks to me, I'm gonna check here. Some showdown value, let's see what happens on future streets. Ends up checking through. Turn, magnificent. It's the 5 of spades, bringing in a second flush draw. However, it gets interesting here. Big blind now leads out for a big size, 40 bucks. I think raising definitely is an option here, but I don't think it's great. Big blind is extremely uncapped and is leading for a big size multi-way. I'm gonna give this a lot of credit. Yes, he might be value betting worst 5x, but that's all I'd really get called by if I raise here. So I put in a call, and we end up going heads up to a river, which is the king of spades. He ends up continuing for 75 bucks. Now, this is kind of a small size, but I also don't see what raising achieves. He's still gonna have straights, he's gonna have some flushes. I put in the call, and he does have a flush. He has 10-9 of spades. Maybe that's one of those hands I would have called a raise on the turn, but there's very few combos of that nature. Funnily enough, the next day starts off against the same guy. I'm in the hijack with 6-7 of spades, open up to 15 bucks, and he free bets cut off to 45 bucks. Big blind, a lady that calls pretty much every single raise pre-flop, puts in a call, and this gives me a pretty good price. I put in a call. The flop is 10-8-5 rainbow, which is probably as good as it's gonna get when you call pre-flop with 7 high. Lady checks, I start off with a check, and the call-off continues for 60 bucks. Lady gets out of the way, and in my notes on him, I have, how do you describe someone that will never ever fold an overpair? I put in a call, and the turn is exactly what the doctor ordered. It's a 9 of diamonds. I check over to him, he continues for 100 bucks, leaving himself with about 210 bucks behind, and I'm a big believer in my notes. I ship it all in, he snap calls and calls for a king on the river, meaning he's got pocket kings. River is a 7, but that doesn't help him. So I stack him and take his seat as he leaves after that hand. But maybe that wasn't the best idea, as I end up in a limp pot with 9-3 offsuit, where I flop bottom 2 pair, but one of the super nits of the room starts betting. He bets out for 15 on the flop, I'm the only caller, turns a 10 of spades, and he continues for 30 bucks. I've literally never seen this man bet anything worse than top pair. So I just put in a call, and the river is another king. I check, he bets 50, and of course I have to fold. He does show me king jack, and I guess the old saying of never go broke in a limp pot remains true.
Tip time with Tom.
Never ever limp or use tiny sizes pre-flop in flat drop games, as if you're gonna play small pots, you're gonna get raked to death. If it ever folds to the blinds or there's one limper, always offer the chop. In this structure, small pots are the enemy. And next hand, I kinda had a flashback to my stationary ways. There's a limp, I'm on the button with pocket 8 and I bump up to 25 bucks. Folds back round to the limper, who now shoves for 180 bucks. He's not young, he's not aggressive, he's over the age of 65. This should always be a fold. But there I was with hopes and dreams and Chinese aces. So obviously I put in a call. The board actually ran out pretty clean, and I still beat ace king and ace queen, but as you can expect, this is always aces from a man over 65. But the second half of this grind also starts off pretty rough. I open jack 9 clubs in the cutoff to 20 bucks, small blind calls and big blind fold. So heads up to a flop of queen 3 deuce with 2 clubs. He checks it over to me, and in single raise spots, I think you can still use range bets. I bet out for 20, and this time we do get raised, which sets off a lot of alarm bells. He makes it 60 bucks. There's already a big case to be made of folding here because he's gonna have sets and he's gonna have bigger draws and strong queen X. But I know this guy. And if a flush hits, he's still gonna pay enough for this to be a worthwhile call. The turn is a 9 of diamonds. Now I'm making it so that I'm ahead of flush draws, and I've got a lot more ads against Queen X. He does continue. He bets out for 75 bucks. With the added equity I picked up, I don't think I can go anywhere. I put in a call and the river's an 8 of diamonds. He now bets out for 250 bucks and obviously I have to fold. But that brings me back to my tip. Mega overfold to aggression. He ended up showing me a set. Even though there might be implied odds, you're sticking the money so far behind that it probably becomes bad again. But I'm not one to give up. I had him for 200 bucks and the next hand I look down at Jack 10 of spades. That's an upgrade in my eyes. There's an open to 20, I put in a flat, the bottom puts in the flat, the small one and the big one come along as well. So 5 ways to a board of 9-8 deuce with 2 spades. Open ender, 2 overcards, flush draw. This is one of those draws I'm happy to bet. If you're gonna blast, do it with equity. So I bet out for 55 bucks. Bottom puts in the call and everyone else folds. The turn is a deuce of diamonds. And this is kind of one of those tricky turns. People get very sticky on board pairing turns and rivers. But he's now also gonna fold better flush draws. And now I have much better equity against 9-8 if he was trapping that. He's only got about 220 bucks behind. So the only way I'm gonna have fold equity here is by shoving. I do that, he thinks it over for a while and calls this time. The river is a 10 of hearts. I table it and he has a little hand funeral before mucking. Which brings me to my second to last day here in LA. And this was really not my day. I wasn't playing well and I was running even worse. In the first hand, there's an open to 10 bucks and a bump up to 40 bucks. This is pretty good. Attacking small sizes, I'm happy with. Small blind calls, who is super sticky, and the limper calls as well. 3 ways to a flop of 8-4-4 rainbow. Small blind checks and the limper comes out and leads. He leads out for 25 bucks. Feels like a draw, worst case scenario, it's a bad 8. I put in the call and the small blind ends up getting out the way. The turn is a 9 of hearts and he now checks it over. I don't see any reason to start betting here, so I check it back. River, deuce of clubs, and he now bets out for 80 bucks. Now, this feels like it's always an 8. If he's given up on bluffs on the turn, he's not going to start firing them again on the river. Attacking this doesn't feel horrible, but putting in a call because you get an incredible price is not good enough. This is a bluff catcher and people don't bluff enough. Either I should raise or I should fold. Obviously, since I said I was playing terribly, I flick it in and of course get shown 10-8 offsuit. Are you seeing this? If idiots like me can win on coin poker, you can too. Sign up under code TOM.
Tip time with Tom.
The most expensive mistakes I made in LA were my passive lines. Jack calling down, trying to bluff catch, and convincing yourself that the middle of your range has showdown value. Unfortunately, in these games, middle of your range is worthless. Either massively overfold or attack all the weak sizes. Don't be in the middle where you're calling down people that don't bluff enough or value bet thinly enough. I have an opportunity to redeem myself with ace jack. There's an open to 20, there's 3 flats, and I put in a call as well in the big blind. The flop comes jack 8-3 with 2 diamonds. I check it over and the original raiser bets out for 25. Now, this guy might be the stickiest guy I've ever played with. Once he's flopped up here, doesn't feel like he's ever gonna go anywhere. Button is just a passive fish who I'm not very worried about. I think this hand is very much good enough to play for stacks here. If he had a set or 2 pair, I'm fairly certain he would have sized up on the flop. So I'm gonna bump it up here and shove the turn. I make it 110 bucks and as expected, this raiser does put in the call. The button also flicks it in for his last 60 bucks. So it creates a side pot, which isn't super ideal. The turn is a 3 of clubs and the raiser's only got about 280, 300 bucks behind. I shove it all in. Unfortunately, this time he folds. The river is a 10 and even when I'm running good, I'm only getting half the pot. Button's got ace jack as well, and the main pot gets chopped up. Same guy who I just chopped it with then opens it up to 20 bucks. I free bet it up to 60 and he goes all in for 120. I snap call and the board runs out pretty bad. I only beat ace king and ace queen. But of course he doesn't have that. He rivered the set with 7s. And this guy just has my number. So at this point I'm in for 1100, not having a great time, but I have one hand to get it all back. There's 2 limps again. I bump up to 35 with kings and small blind 3 bets up to 120. Everyone else gets out the way and I think I only have one move. I'm all in. Let's just pray he doesn't have aces as he snap calls. I go to film the board, which is 10-9-8, and I see he has the other 2 kings. So we chop it up and I definitely don't get out the hole for the day. Last day in the commerce. Let's see what they've got in store for me today. For my very last day in LA, I start off as hot as you can start. First hand on a freshly opened table, ace king. There's a limp, I make it 25. Big blind calls, limper calls. Flop, king, 8, deuce, rainbow. Checks to me, I bet 30, they both fold. Very next hand, queens. There's an open to 15, I 3-bet up to 60 from the cutoff. He calls, and we go heads up to a flop of 8, 5, 4, rainbow. He checks over to me, and I continue. I bet out for 60 bucks again, and he puts in a very quick call. Turn looks excellent, it's a 4 of spades. However, now he leads, and he leads for 120 bucks. In general, I say fold to aggression. However, here it's very different. The story also has to make sense. How does he have any value here apart from 2 combos of ace-4 suited? He wouldn't start leading a boat, and even if he did have ace-4 suited, wouldn't he just check it over to me, letting me barrel? So I assume this is pretty much always just air. Trying to steal it, trying to rep a range advantage that isn't really there. This might be a thing in single race pots, but in 3-bet pots, in these positions, it's definitely not a thing. This feels like it's full of bullshit. So I just put in a call, and I'm gonna let him blast. The river is a jack of clubs, and he does blast. He ships it all in, and I don't see how he ever has any value. I quickly flick him 1 chip, and he announces king high before mucking. Make sure you always fact check. It's actually possible for them to have a hand they're repping. Unfortunately, that kind of bites me in the ass in the next hand. There's an open from middle position to 20 bucks, bottom flat, and I'm in the big line with queen 10 off. I flick in the call, and flop comes 10, 9, 3 with 2 spades. I check, undergun checks, and now the bottom fires out for 60 bucks. This is a huge sizing and should be setting off massive alarm bells. I have the queen of spades, which blocks a ton of combo draws, which means his range is going to be much more condensed around value. But in my stubborn and winning ways, I put in a call. Undergun gets out the way, and the turn is a 7 of clubs. I check it over, expecting to fold to another massive bet. But no bet comes. He checks it back, and the river is a 9 of diamonds. I check it over to him one last time, kinda hoping to get the showdown, but also not seeing how he has any 9x or any thick value left. I check over, he bets out for 80 bucks. Unless he's value betting ace 10 or king 10, I don't see what value you can have that didn't barrel the turn on such a wet and dynamic board. I put in a call, and I instantly eat my own words as he shows me quad 9s. That's where the filming stopped. I played a 1 more session right after one you just saw where I didn't film. Turns out I ended up getting it in on a turn with kings against queens on jack 10 4 8, and unfortunately the river was a 9, meaning the buy-in I won in the first session was quickly given back. To be honest, that feels like a very fitting last hand in LA of how I ran here. The week turned out super uneventful. In 26 hours of play, I ended up down 86 bucks. I had some good results, I had some bad results in the US, but now begins the next chapter.